Welcome to Fred's Financial Planning Workshops. Today we're going to be talking about Social Security and Medicare. I'm Fred Smith. I'm with the Silicon Valley chapter of the AAII, and today we're going to, as I said, covering Social Security and Medicare. The slides are available if you choose to download them from www.siliconvalleyai.org/financial planning. And I've given you my email address here in case you have any questions or comments, critique that you'd like to pass on. We start off with our standard disclaimer, which basically says that the opinions expressed here are not necessarily those of the AAII or local chapter, and that nothing that we're going to talk about today should be considered a solicitation to buy or sell anything. And we've been running these financial planning workshops for some time. We've already covered investing and taxes, retirement planning, risk management and insurance. And today we're on to another aspect of that, which is Social Security and Medicare. Next month, we move on to estate planning and finally wrap up with a case study and a review of all of our previous material. So we're going to be covering the Social Security benefits today and discussing full retirement age and the details of early and late retirement. We're going to be discussing the benefits for the worker benefits, spousal benefits, minor children and survivors. We're going to look at claiming strategies for both singles and married couples because they are a little different. And then finally, we move on to Medicare, parts A, B, C, and D. We'll spend some time on what I consider the 7 myths of Medicare, things that a lot of people think but aren't necessarily true. And then we'll wrap up with a comparison of the original Medicare, traditional Medicare, and the Medicare Advantage plans. As background, Franklin Roosevelt introduced Social Security Act back in 1935. At that time, the benefits were only for the worker. There were no spousal benefits or survivor benefits. It was funded by a 2% tax on the first $3,000 of earnings, and there were approximately 7 workers for each retiree, which is why they were able to go with the lower tax on the lower earnings cap. People were expected to not push, the retirement age was 65 and people were expected to have the good grace to pass on within 5 years. So at that time, longevity did not stretch out into the 80s and 90s and beyond. Other benefits were added over the years. 1939, the spouse and minor children were added. 1950, COLA's adjustment was added to the program. Disability benefits were added in 1954. And then, of course, the big one in 1965, Lyndon Johnson added the Medicare benefits, followed in later years by SSI benefits and the TAMF program and the SHIP program. So it's been growing over the years with more and more programs and more coverage. Today, the Social Security Administration covers a whole host of programs, not just the old age survivors and disability insurance, OASDI. That's what people commonly think of as Social Security today. It's just that part of it. But the administration also covers the TAMF program. Medicare is covered under the SSA, along with Medicaid, or in California, Medi-Cal, and the SHIP and SSI programs are all covered under the SSA administration. As we said before, the maximum earnings, there's a cap when it was first introduced of $3,000, and that's gone up steadily since then. In 1990, it was up to $51,000. In 2000, it was $76,000. 2010, it was $106,800. And in 2021, it's $142,800. That's the current cap on the earnings that are taxed by FICA. Current funding of the SSA program comes from a 6.2% cap on earnings, or 6.2% tax on earnings up to $142,800 of income. And then there's a 1.45% additional tax for Medicare, but there is no income cap on that. That goes on to all earnings. The employer normally makes a matching contribution to this amount that's paid by the worker. If you're self-employed, you have the joy of paying both of them, which will be a total tax of about 15.3%. We started off with 7 workers, as I said, per retiree. That's now down to about 3 workers per retiree. So it's getting more and more difficult for the workers to fund the retirees. And that's projected to drop to something in the region of 2.2, maybe 2.3 workers per retiree by 2030. So how are the benefits calculated? Well, first of all, the SSA looks at the number of quarters that you worked. You must have worked for at least 40 quarters. They define it in quarters rather than just 10 years, I guess, because folks are working non-consecutive quarters. You can add it all up this way. And the income from the early years is adjusted for inflation. That's up to age 60, and then after age 60, the raw data for your earnings is taken without any inflation adjustment. So then they take all of the earnings as adjusted for inflation and take the 35 highest earning years. And if you don't have 35 years total with earnings, then the empty years are backfilled with zeros. So it's worth trying to obviously complete your working career to fill in non-zero amounts for all 35 years if possible. It's a good goal. It's not essential, but if you don't make the full 35 years and it gets backfilled with zeros, that's going to drag down your average as calculated here. They take the sum total of the 35 years and divide it by 420, which is the number of months in 35 years. And that gives you the AIM, the average indexed monthly earnings. And from the AIM, you calculate your PIA, the primary insurance amount, and that goes off this formula here. These percentages remain constant year after year, but the various breakpoints change with inflation. And then when you get your primary insurance amount calculated, then that's what's used for your monthly benefit if you retire at the full retirement age. If you're unfortunate enough to have been born in 1960, there's a potential hit that you probably can't do a whole lot about, but you should at least be aware of it. Obviously, if you were born in 1960, then you're going to turn 60 in 2020. So when the income from your previous years is adjusted to calculate or to cover for inflation, in calculating the 35 years, the average wage index that they use for the adjustment will be for 2020. All of your earnings will be adjusted to normalize to 2020. But unfortunately, 2020 was hit by a pandemic, and so the average wages are a little lower than might be expected. And that means that your adjusted wages for the 35 years gets adjusted to a lower number, which in turn reduces your AIM and your PIA amounts, and they're likely to be lower than normal, lower certainly than you might have expected for your future benefits. This hit possibly occurred also, I would guess, back in for the 2008, 2009 crunch that we had for those years, but it probably wasn't as bad as this. But I think Congress has been looking at the possibility of correcting this hit on the folks born in 1960. I'm not sure that it's very high up on the list, so it may not happen, but it's worth checking out if you are in fact unfortunate enough to be hit by that. Okay, so for full retirement age, how do you calculate it? Everything gets based on this. So we said, initially it was age 65. Then it gradually increased in steps up to age 66. And then for all people born between 1943 and 54, it's age 66. Then it started incrementally increasing again. So for anybody born in 1960 or beyond, the full retirement age is 67. There's a possibility that going forward, this may get adjusted up more, but at the moment, 67 is the full retirement age for those younger folks born on or after 1960. It's possible to claim benefits earlier than your full retirement age if you choose to do so, but the benefit will be reduced accordingly. And the SSA has a fancy algorithm for calculating that. You're going to lose 0.09% per month early that you claim benefits up to the first 36 months, and thereafter 0.05%. Just to put things into a more practical aspect here, I've calculated the full retirement age PIA. For folks born between 1943 and 1954, they will lose 6.7% approximately if they retire 1 year earlier. If they retire 2 years earlier, the hit is worse, and all the way to retiring 4 years earlier at age 62, they would lose 25% of their benefits. In other words, they'll only get 75% of the benefits that they would have gotten had they waited to full retirement age. But 62 is the earliest that they can claim. You can't go back beyond earlier than age 62. For late retirement, it works the other way around. Your benefits increase by 8% per annum for each year that you delay taking benefits up to age 70. So at age 70, you'd actually get a 32% increase. There's no benefit beyond that. So you may as well start taking benefits at age 70. There's no reason to wait beyond that. This table just gives you a summary of all the stuff that we've discussed previously for early retirement and late retirement. If your full retirement age was 66 and you retired at age 66, you'd get 100% of your benefits. If you retired earlier, as we just looked at, you'd only get 75%. And if you delayed to age 70, you'd get 32% extra, 132% total. If, on the other hand, let's go across the chart to age 67, for the folks who are younger and born later, if you crank through all the numbers, if you claim benefits early at age 62, you only get 70% of the primary insurance amount, the PIA. And if you delay to age 70, then you only get 3 years at 8% per annum, so it works out at 124%. And then you've got all the data if you want to look up your own situation in between those two limits. So what's happened for the COLAs, the cost of living allowances? It started off, in fairly decent numbers, and in the 80s, there are actually some double-digit cost of living adjustments that were made. This was back in the days of higher inflation. If you look at the current situation, it's a lot lower because inflation is significantly lower now than it was back then. And in fact, there are some years when the COLA was 0%. 2009, 2010, 2015, there was no adjustment for inflation. The latest increase was a 1.3%, which technically went into effect in December of 2020, but it's actually the effective rate for this calendar year, for 2021. What I'm showing here is just a graphic representation of what your total lifetime earnings might look like for early retirement and late retirement. The dotted line here shows the folks who retired at the full retirement age. This is assuming a 3% per annum appreciation and 3% inflation, but don't worry about the detailed numbers. I just wanted to show how the curves work. So if the dotted line here is your full retirement age accumulation, starting at age 62 and assuming that you're fortunate to live all the way, through to age 100, this is what you would have accumulated, and at that point, assuming that the your PIA was $1,000 a month. If you elected to take early retirement, then obviously your accumulated earnings starts at age 62 and goes up following this red curve. But since you were taking retirement earlier and your benefits are reduced, by 25%, then that carries all the way through, and you end up with a lower final result than if you live to a ripe old age. On the other hand, if you elect to take late retirement, that will give you the green line here, and you get the benefits of a higher initial payment at age 70, the 32% bump, and your final accumulation over the years, if you live to age 100, is significantly higher. But the main point I want to show is that they all cross somewhere in the low 80s. The Social Security has all the actuarial data, and what they've attempted to accomplish is to make sure that no matter which retirement plan you elect to go on, it works out pretty much as a wash if you were to die in the early 80s at the average ages. I mean, if you live beyond that, that's where they separate, and you really get the benefits of late retirement coming through. Okay, so we've talked so far about the retirement benefits for the worker. I want to discuss real quickly the spousal benefits. For a spouse, in order for a spouse to claim benefits, he or she, the worker, first of all, must be already receiving benefits, and the spouse must be at least age 62. And at that age, he or she can elect to take either they're at full retirement age, they can take 100% of their own benefit. That's the PIA that by definition is 100% at full retirement age. Or if it's greater, they can instead take 50% of the working spouse's retirement benefit. For same-sex couples, they're entitled to the same benefits if they are legally married and the state that they live in recognizes that marriage. So that's the spousal benefits. Spouses can take benefits early as well if they want to do so. There's an even more complicated formula here. If they elect to take their benefits early, they're going to lose 25/36 of 1% per month early for the first 36 months, and then 5/12 of 1% for any duration there, beyond the 36 months. Putting that into the more easily understood numbers, if they take the benefits at full retirement age, they get obviously what we talked about before, 50% of the workers' benefits, and then that declines as they go earlier and earlier. So if they go 5 years earlier, they only get 32.5%, down from 50% to 32.5% of the workers' benefits. Minor children can get benefits. If the parents are collecting retirement benefits, the minor children are entitled to benefits up to age 18 or up to age 19 if they're still in school. They must be unmarried, and each child is entitled to 50% of the parent's full retirement age benefit. But there's a family cap that's far too complicated to go into at this point. Survivor benefits is another benefit that got added to the program, some decades ago. A widow can claim a survivor benefit if the marriage lasted at least 9 months, the survivor is at least 60 years old, or at least 50 years old if disabled, and the survivor must not have remarried unless the remarrying was after age 60. This to me sounds very remarkably close to an if then else clause in programming. There's a lot of fine print qualifications on all of the limitations. The survivor benefits claimed at full retirement age are equal to the deceased benefits, the full benefit of the deceased spouse, including any delays that were any delayed benefits that were earned, if they're greater than the survivor's own benefit. If the survivor's own benefit is greater, he or she can elect that one instead of the spouse's benefit. And reduced benefits in this case can be elected as early as age 60 as opposed to 62. It's a slight difference. But again, claiming early is going to cost. And if you claim 1 year earlier than full retirement age, instead of getting 100%, it drops to 95.3%. If you claim 5 years earlier, it drops to 76% and change. The same principle, just different numbers. Divorced spouses are entitled to a benefit. They must have been married for at least 10 years, must not have remarried, and the ex-spouse can claim a benefit from the as a survivor benefit, and also a widow or widower. This is kind of interesting with the and in here, because both of these folks can claim benefits based on the worker's account. And in fact, if you look at the 10-year limitation, there could be a number of ex-spouses. There could be 2, 3, 4 ex-spouses if they each satisfy the 10-year marriage limit. So you could have as many as 3, 4, 5 people collecting benefits from the worker's account. The ex-spouse's benefits are not affected in any way. The worker need not have filed and doesn't even need to know that the benefits are being claimed on his or her account. Back in 2015, early 2016, there was a bipartisan budget act passed which limited some of the real niceties of the old law. Under the old law, it was possible to file a restricted claim for just spousal benefits only, instead of your own benefits, and then have your own benefits accrue at the 8% per annum up to age 70. And the spousal benefits, as we discussed, were equal to to half of the worker's benefits. So you could take those benefits and then have your own benefits continue to accrue at 8% per annum. After April of 2016, that whole concept disappeared, with this budget act, and at this point or since then, if anybody asks to have their payments suspended, it's still possible to do it, but it suspends all of the other payments and benefits that were being made, either to spouses or minor children or anybody else. If the worker suspended his or her payments, everything else got suspended. Also, it's no longer possible to take a lump sum payment for benefit that had already been withheld. That was a benefit that used to be available or potentially available prior to this act. A worker can still obviously suspend his or her own benefit, after full retirement age to earn the extra delayed retirement credits. For anybody that had filed prior to the 30th of April 2016, this doesn't. This new constraint does not apply. So all of the benefits, will still apply. Nothing's changed for folks that that had filed prior to that date. Okay, so what what strategy should you look to when you're trying to decide how you want to structure your benefits? Do you want to go for early retirement or late retirement or collected full retirement age or whatever? I can see two rational strategies here that you may want to consider. One is to maximize the present value of your lifetime earnings, assuming that all the actuarial data holds and that you expect your lifetime to be an average one. And what you're in essence saying is, I want to get the most out of the system. If I die at the expected age, if I die in my early 80s, which is the average, or mid to late 80s now, I want at that point to have pulled as much out of the system as possible. That might perhaps mean claiming either early retirement or the full retirement age. But probably, if those were your constraints, you might argue that filing for late benefits would perhaps not make sense. But the other viewpoint could argue that if I die early, I'm not going to be worried by any of the money problems. I'm really concerned about what happens if I survive into my 90s, and at that point I want to maximize the benefits at that point so I don't run out of money. So folks that are concerned about longevity risk would clearly want to opt for the late retirement strategy. But it's an individual issue, and you need to look at your own situation in this and decide which of those two strategies makes most sense for you. And we'll get into in a minute discussing what externalities might affect that. So when should a single person start taking benefits? Well, a single person should claim early if he or she needs the money now. I mean, that's a no-brainer. If you need the money, you need the money, and you've got no choice. Or if you're in poor health, you probably want to consider taking benefits early. Or if you have a family history of poor health, if you look at the longevity for your parents and grandparents, it may well be that the family history is not that great. So you might figure that could possibly reflect on your longevity, and you might want to consider taking benefits early. Absent any of those reasons, a single person would probably want to consider delaying benefits at least to the full retirement age and possibly to age 70. That's particularly true if they're still working. For a married couple, it's a little more complicated. First of all, you need to understand that the Social Security benefits for a married couple kind of works like a joint annuity. The surviving spouse gets to receive the benefits from his or her own account, or the deceased spouse's benefits, whichever is the greater. So the deceased spouse's benefits can be taken over by the surviving spouse, if that looks like a better deal. Looking purely at very simple probability theory, if there's an average, half of the spouses, half the people are going to die at the average age. So you're going to have a 75% probability that at least one spouse will live beyond the average. It's just simple math. So if that's the case, for most married couples, under normal conditions, and there are always exceptions, it's usually best to maximize the benefits of the higher earning spouse by delaying those benefits to age 70. And that would normally be the best strategy, unless, and here we get into the fine print, unless both spouses suffer from health problems, or you really need the money. That one always comes in. The reason I'm saying both spouses suffer from health problems is because if only one spouse has health problems and the other spouse is reasonably healthy and can hope to live into his or her 80s, 90s, or beyond, then it would still make sense to maximize the earnings for the higher earning spouse. What you're doing really is maximizing the benefits for the surviving spouse, regardless of who dies first. What if circumstances change? Is it possible to get a do-over under any conditions? Well, let's look first at someone who has decided to delay taking benefits to age 70 to maximize their benefits, but then they run into a problem. Supposing they either really need the money for some reason, or both spouses suddenly develop health problems where they decide that maximizing or optimizing the benefits for a long term may not be the optimum strategy anymore. So there's a limited do-over for these people. You can backdate an application to the month of your full retirement age, or for 6 months, whichever is shorter, and collect a lump sum for the benefits that you've missed. And this is a pretty narrow window. It's 6 months maximum that you can go back. But if you discover that you want to change your mind and that deferring the benefits was not a good idea, you can go back up to 6 months and collect the back benefits and then move ahead with your normal benefits at that time. Looking at the other way around, is there a do-over strategy for folks who filed early and want to change their mind? Well, they actually have two different plans. If you change your mind within 12 months of first claiming benefits, you're going to you have the possibility of returning all those payments received and restart your benefits at a later date, and therefore for at a higher rate. That's a once in a lifetime option, but it's a tough one for most people. If you've been collecting your early benefits for many months, if you want to go writing a check to the Social Security to return all that money, that could be a sizable check to write, and a difficult one to do for most people. The other option that you have available is to wait until your full retirement age, at which point you can voluntarily suspend all future benefits out to age 70 if you want to at 8% per annum. But since you've already started collecting some of the benefits from retiring early before you introduce this delay, then those benefits will be reduced because of that. But you can get the future increases. How about if folks are still working? They want to claim early benefits, but they still have a paycheck coming in. What happens under those conditions? Well, first thing that happens is that if you're taking the benefits before full retirement age, you're going to lose $1 in benefit for every $2 you've earned, up to a cap of $18,960 for the current year. And during the year in which you reach your full retirement age, the numbers change a little. You lose $1 for every $3 earned, up to a significantly higher cap. After you reach full retirement age, there's no reduction in benefits. Now, the one thing I want to make clear here is that the reduction in benefits that occurs if you're working and get your earnings fall above these caps, and so that your benefits are reduced, the benefits aren't tossed in a trash can. You do get them restored after you reach full retirement age. The Social Security office recalculates your future benefits after full retirement age, taking into account what has been reduced in these early years. But the bottom line is that this gets a little complicated and cumbersome, and for most people, if you plan to keep working up to full retirement age, it probably doesn't make any sense to claim early benefits. Again, there may be exceptions, but under normal conditions, that normally is the case. The other thing you should be aware of is that your benefits may be taxable. In order to figure that out, you have to compute the what they call the combined income, which is your 1040, your federal AGI plus the non-taxable interest from your munis or whatever, and add into that half of your Social Security benefit. And for single folks, if their combined income is less than $25,000, nothing gets taxed. None of your benefits get taxed. If it's in this range, 50% of the benefits are taxed. And if it's above the $34,000, then 85% of the benefits get added to your taxable, your total income and your AGI and taxable income on your federal 1040. For married couples, the same rules apply, but the breakpoints are a little bit higher. But again, you can have up to 85% of your benefits added to your taxable income. As far as the state tax goes, California has elected not to tax your Social Security benefits, but it does vary by state. Okay, at this point, we want to change the what we're talking about a little bit and switch into Medicare. That was enacted by Lyndon Johnson, as we said earlier, in 1965, and most folks are aware you've got Parts A, B, C, and D. Part A is for major medical and hospitalization. B covers doctor visits, outpatient care. Part C is the Medicare Advantage programs. We're going to talk about those a little more at a later point. And then Part D is for prescription drugs. So I want to look at the 7 myths of Medicare, things to watch out for. Things that some people think they know, but that aren't necessarily so. First one is the notion I can sign up anytime. There's no rush. I don't have to sign up at age 65. Be very careful of that one. There's a 7-month window that brackets the month in which your 65th birthday occurs, and 3 months on each side of it. Note that this is regardless of what your full retirement age is and whether you've elected earlier or late benefits or whatever with regard to your Social Security benefits. This is your 65th birthday period. If you miss that window, there's a draconian penalty that applies, unless you meet some of the exceptions. The penalty is 1% per month for each month that you've delayed. For example, if for any reason you've elected not to sign up for your Medicare benefits and payments until age 70, you're 5 years late, and you'll pay a 60% penalty on your payments for the rest of your life. It never goes away. So you do not want to take that lightly. The only, or the biggest exception, and maybe others, is that the penalty does not apply if you can prove that you're covered by what the Social Security Administration calls a creditable plan. What that really means is if you're working, your employer probably has a plan, and if a health care plan, and if that plan meets or matches the Medicare benefits or exceeds them, then it would probably be deemed a creditable plan, and you would not be stuck with this penalty. If that is the case, I suggest that you talk to your HR department and get a note from them. In fact, most of them perhaps even do it automatically, that it gives you in writing a brief document, probably just a 1-page letter that confirms that the plan that they have, that they are offering, that you're covered by, does in fact meet the requirements of a creditable plan under the Medicare rules. It's a lot easier to get that taken care of at age 65 than it is if you get involved in an argument at later age as to whether or not the plan that you've been using is a creditable plan, purely because the penalty, if you get the wrong choice later, is such a heavy hit. Myth number 2. I'm not taking any serious drugs at this point, so I don't need to the Part D coverage. I can do that later. But the same arguments apply, and the same draconian penalty, or a similar draconian penalty, applies if you don't sign up for the Part D coverage at age 65 or in that 7-month window. In this case, instead of 1% a month, you get a 10% per annum hit for every year that you're late in signing up. So again, if you wait 5 years and you're not covered by a creditable plan, then you're going to have a 50% penalty for the rest of your life. Do not take signing up at the correct time lightly. Just put a big mark on your calendar. Myth number 3: I've been paying into Medicare all my life, at every paycheck. So there's only a minimal charge for my benefits at this point. Well, it depends, I think, on how you define nominal in this case. In this calendar year, in 2021, the standard Part B premium is $153.30. It works out at just over $1,800 per annum. Maybe nominal, may not be. I don't know. It depends on the individual. But high earners have an additional hit, and to determine, if you're going to get hit with this, you have to calculate your modified adjusted gross income, and that the calculation for that, in this case, the MAGI is defined differently to before. So not all MAGIs are defined the same. You have to be careful. But in this case, for this test, it's your federal AGI plus the tax exempt interest income. Again, you add back in the muni interest. And the Social Security Administration gets this data from your previous tax returns. They have access to all your tax returns, and they go back to the return from 2 years earlier. In 2021, they would look at your at the returns you filed for 2019, because you may not have yet filed the 2020 tax returns. You may have filed for an extension of those, and they may not have access to that data. So they go back 2 years and look at your MAGI, and then if it's above certain limits, we'll discuss that in a minute, then you're going to pay an additional IRMA, income-related monthly adjustment amount, and that's for on your Part B premium that's due every month. For Part D, for your prescription drugs, usually, if you're on Medicare, traditional Medicare, original Medicare, you're going to have a private insurance plan that covers the drugs separately. But the Part D coverage, if you have an Advantage plan, then the Part D is prescriptions are probably already included in that. But again, if your MAGI exceeds the limit going back to your 2019 federal returns, again, you're going to have an IRMA to pay on the Part D drugs as well. So how significant is the IRMA? Well, what I've done here is make up a table that shows you the IRMA for Part B and the IRMA for Part D. And if you're a single filer with a modified AGI less than $88,000 or married filing jointly under $176,000, then the IRMA is zero. You got no additional hit. But as your MAGI goes up, as it increases for both single filers and married filing jointly, then the IRMA becomes pretty significant pretty quickly. Just as an example, for somebody, a single filer, earning over $111,000 or married filing jointly over $222,000, you've got an IRMA hit of $148.50 per month, and on top of your normal, $153 per month. And then you have to pay an additional $31.80 per month for the drugs. This again is on top of the premium that you're already paying to the insurance company for your prescription drug coverage. At the extreme level, if you take the $356 per month and add that to the $153 a month that you're already paying for the standard number, and this additional number for that, you can wind up paying $7,000 or $8,000 per year extra because of the IRMA, because you're in the high brackets. So that's certainly not what most people would consider a nominal number. Okay, myth number 4. I've signed up for all my medical, for Medicare, and I've paid all my premiums and everything. So now most of my medical costs should be covered. Well, again, maybe not, probably not. First of all, there are significant deductions and co-payments that apply here. You can have a lot of the Medicare stuff has a 20% co-payment, so that can be a significant amount. And most people, not all people, elect to cover these gaps by buying a Medigap supplemental insurance policy. You go to a private insurer, to your Blue Cross Blue Shield or whoever, for a separate policy that covers the gaps in traditional Medicare. If you have an Advantage plan, the Part C Advantage plan from a private insurer, the rules of that will apply, so you won't get hit by the Medicare co-payments and deductions. The Medigap plans normally cover all the things that are the holes that are missing from the traditional Medicare plan, and these come in a whole range of different standard policies. The policies and the terms have all been standardized, and there's a range of them. With the early ones covering very little coverage. The maximum ones, that it turns out to be the F and G coverage, have pretty much cover almost all of the gaps in traditional Medicare. But we need to talk about the fine print in a minute, because some of these no longer exist. But you need to note that although the coverage for all of these is standardized, the premium is not. So it's worthwhile shopping around the range of private insurers to find out who offers the plan that you want at the cheapest premium. But the terms will be within the policy will be standardized for all of them. Okay, so you figure that you're covered by Medicare, and now you want to travel. So you figure, regardless of where I go, Medicare is going to cover me. Well, again, not necessarily. Within the U.S. borders, yes, but as soon as you set foot outside the U.S., clearly for traditional Medicare, it's a big no way at all. So if Medicare does not cover any illnesses when you're traveling outside of the U.S., what are your options? Well, one thought might be to look into the Advantage plans. Most of the Advantage plans offer at least some coverage, if you fall ill on foreign soil, or some of the Medigap supplemental plans cover foreign travel as well. Plans C, D, F, and G are the four in the big long string of letters I showed you earlier that include foreign travel. But the other ones do not. These other plans down here clearly do not give you any benefit at all for foreign travel. The ones that do include travel, you have to be a little careful about, because plans C and F are no longer available to new enrollees. They're still available to anybody who enrolled on them, a couple of years ago before they got canceled. But in essence, Medicare decided that they did not want to have private insurance offer plans that covered their deductible. So that ruled out a number of plans. The C and F are only available to folks who are grandfathered in from having signed up earlier. And plans, the other thing of interest here is that plans F and G, these are the ones that cover most of the broadest of the plans. They're also available in high deductible versions. The regular version covers, as I said, it's the broadest coverage, but for that reason, it's the most expensive. But some folks like to go for the high deductible versions, which may have a deductible of a couple of $1,000s or more, but that reduces the premium significantly, and for some people, it's a preferable way to go. Like I said, these plans do not include any coverage at all. And if you don't have a Medicare Advantage plan and you don't have a supplemental plan that covers foreign travel, then you may want to consider buying separate insurance. Bottom line is pure Medicare covers nothing outside the U.S. Most Advantage plans, most of them give you some coverage outside the U.S. and the Medigap policies, the ones that I've listed here, also give you some coverage outside the U.S. But you need to read the fine print carefully because most of them have caps on and constraints on how much coverage you get. Myth number 6. Medicare will cover all of my long-term care needs. That's very, very clearly untrue. The limits imposed for long-term coverage, Medicare basically offers no long-term care coverage in the normally accepted use of the term. The only thing that happens is that you get coverage for 90 days for rehab after hospitalization. And beyond the 90 days, nothing unless you're re-hospitalized. So what I've said here is very limited, is actually an understatement. It's in essence non-existent. So if long-term care is a consideration for you, then you should certainly consider a separate long-term care policy. And I covered this last month in the financial planning workshop then, and the recording and slides are available. But the conclusion back then is that long-term care is a potential train wreck, that you might have a great plan in place, but if you run into a long-term care problem that you have not got covered by some means, it could blow a big hole in your plan. So you've got to be careful. Long-term care policies normally make most sense for middle-income people. The very rich don't need it; they can self-fund, and then the very poor probably can't afford it. But for most people, you need to look at it carefully and consider what are your long-term care plans should you become disabled on a long-term basis in future. The last myth I want to talk about involves your health savings account, your HSA. HSAs are the best of all worlds, I think, for most people, in that you get triple tax advantages. The contributions are tax deductible when you're made, the earnings are tax free, and withdrawals are not taxed either as long as they're for medical purposes. That's a pretty good deal. There are some requirements for an HSA. The most dominant one is that you must have a high deductible plan in place. And that's similar to what we talked about before for high deductible plans. And you must not be on Medicare. If you meet the requirements and you do have an HSA and you want to contribute to it, the contribution limits are $3,600 per person for single person, or $7,200 for married couple, with an additional $1,000 for those over age 55. Some people use this almost in place of an IRA. in that, these tax advantages are pretty compelling, but you have to be very, very careful, because as soon as you go on Medicare, you are no longer allowed to make any contributions to them, but whatever the balance of your account is, you can make withdrawals later in life without any problem. But you have to be careful if you sign up early for your Social Security benefits, because if you've signed up for benefits at age 62, 63, whatever, the day you turn age 65, the Social Security Administration is going to automatically sign you up on Medicare. So be aware of that, and that's automatically going to disqualify you, your HSA plan, for any future benefits. It's not a big deal so long as you know about it and are ready for it, but don't let it happen by default without being aware that it's going on. Okay, I said I'm going to look at a comparison of your traditional Medicare and your Medicare Advantage plans. For folks that are starting off, reaching the age 65 and trying to consider what to do and how to do it, there's a whole ton of information out there, and it's actually far more complicated than it should be. But nonetheless, it's something that you got to work through. But the big choice is, do you want to go with traditional Medicare, probably with a Medigap policy added onto it, or do you want to go with the Medicare Advantage plan? So I've tried to list some of the main parameters that you need to consider, in this comparison, and show you the pros and cons of each. If you're going with traditional Medicare, that's a fee-for-service plan, whereas the Advantage plans work off a managed care basis. Federal government is the insurer for Medicare, but for the Advantage plans, they're offered not by the government, but by a private insurer. Now, the private insurer will get reimbursed by the government to some extent, but you're dealing with the private insurer, not with the federal government. You've got deductibles that apply in both cases. Co-insurance, we already said you can have a 20% co-insurance for Medicare. The Advantage plan is usually not. Out-of-pocket limits. Let's look at the Advantage plans first. Most Advantage plans have an out-of-pocket limit of a few. They give you a formal number. I think it's probably in the region of a few $1,000s per annum that you will never have to go pay beyond that. There's no such limit for the traditional Medicare. The sky's the limit. If you happen to be unfortunate enough to have a bad medical year, you can keep paying and paying and paying for the original Medicare, for the traditional Medicare. For the traditional Medicare, theoretically, you can go to any doctor that you want anywhere in the U.S. that accepts Medicare, and that we should get reimbursed for it. Whereas with the Advantage plans, you have to stay within your normal network, unless you're traveling outside the network. Then there are rules that let you see doctors for emergency use and so on outside the network. Across the U.S., most doctors, the data shows that most doctors accept Medicare. I suspect that here in Silicon Valley, that may be a little different. There are a number of doctors that will not accept Medicare patients. So if you want to go this path, you probably want to call your doctor and check with their office that they do, your current doctor, your favorite doctor, the one that you're signing up for this path, just to stay with that doctor. Call the office and make sure that they do, in fact, accept Medicare. If you need to see a specialist, you can go to any specialist you want with traditional Medicare without getting permission from anybody. But with the Advantage plans, you need to go through a gatekeeper. Usually he'll be your primary care doctor, and he or she will refer you to the specialist. So that's a limit that's imposed for the Advantage plans. Drug coverage is not included in traditional Medicare, so you need a separate policy for that. And the same thing goes for vision and dental care. They're not covered under traditional Medicare. And as we already said, coverage outside the USA is not covered by traditional Medicare, and unless you have one of the Medigap policies that we talked about before that does cover foreign policy. All of these things are usually covered to at least some extent by the Medicare Advantage plans. There may be caps, and there will be caps, and you need to read the fine print. From the logistics point of view, there's a difference here which may not be important to a lot of people, but anybody who elects to go the Medicare, traditional Medicare route will usually have to carry 3 cards in their wallet. You need your Medicare card, you need your Medigap card, and you need your Part D prescription drug card, and carry all 3 of them, and use them as appropriate. For those folks who are on have elected to go with an Advantage plan, usually you only need 1 card for the all uses, and it's very similar to what most people are used to having if they were employed with a corporation that offered them healthcare insurance. This is 1 card for everything. If you go one way and want to switch to the other way, how easy or hard is it to do? Well, it's very easy if you're signed up on regular Medicare to switch to an Advantage plan. You just sign up with the Advantage plan. It automatically signs you off on the traditional Medicare. Going from, if you've elected to go with an Advantage plan and you want to switch to the traditional Medicare, it's certainly possible to do it. There's no problem switching to the Medicare program itself, but you may run into difficulties that you need to check out carefully in switching back and then signing up for a Medigap policy. If you go with a Medigap policy, immediately at the time that you are eligible for Medicare, in other words, at age 65, the Medigap policies are constrained that they cannot restrict your benefits based on prior conditions. And they're kind of standardized in being constrained to offer you reasonable policies at reasonable prices. But if you're on Medicare for a few years and want to switch back to the traditional Medicare and then need to sign up with a Medigap insurer, at that point they can take pre-existing conditions into account. Your premium can bump way up above what you would have paid earlier, and in fact under some conditions they are allowed to say that they will not cover you, period. If your pre-existing conditions are such, they may just elect to no bid your request. So switching from Advantage back to Medicare is doable to some extent, but there's fine print and you just need to be careful with it. Future for both programs holds many challenges. The biggest problem, the overriding problem, is that we have an aging population, so there are more and more people moving into the retirement group and fewer people in the worker group. And as I said before, the ratio is projected to drop down to 2.2 workers per retiree in 2030, which puts a big strain on the finances. Unless Congress acts, the regular the Social Security payments that we know, the OSDI, that fund is projected to run out in 2034. And when it runs out, it won't necessarily mean that your payment, that your Social Security benefits drop to zero. They will drop to something in the region of 70 to 80% of the current levels, because they're going to be funded only by what the workers are paying into the system, and there will be nothing left in the trust fund to augment that. So again, there's some incentive for Congress to act over the next 13 years, I guess, to prevent this from happening, because it's not going to be good for their reelection prospects if Social Security recipients see a drop of 20 or 30% in their benefits. SSI program is already in, well, I won't say in trouble, but their solution to stay out of trouble is to borrow from the OASDI trust. Medical costs in the US are rising way, way faster than CPI, which means that the Medicare costs are also rising faster than CPI. And the data that I've seen shows that the Medicare trust will be depleted in 2026, in which case the benefits that you would get in terms of reimbursed expenses could drop to 90% of what you might expect. This seems to me to be a very critical number. I'm surprised that it's that recent and nobody's hit the panic button yet. This seems to me that it's something that Congress should be addressing immediately. So how are we going to fix these problems? Well, the hoary old solution that everybody comes up with, well, we can solve this by eliminating fraud and abuse. In this case, that could be a particularly important phrase to think about, because they are huge programs, and the opportunities for fraud and abuse in managing these programs is pretty high. You've probably all seen commercials on TV which say, do you need a wheelchair? We'll send you one for free. Just sign up here, and it'll be FedEx to your front door within a week. Obviously, what they're doing is sending in claims to Medicare to have all of this reimbursed and then some. So there's a fairly serious element of fraud out there, but it's going to be difficult to eliminate it. But way over and beyond that, here are some of the other solutions that are being considered, and none of them is good. They are all, to each and every last one, horrible solutions. And I can understand why Congress is delaying addressing them, because there is no good answer. One possibility is to take the 15.3% FICA tax that we're currently paying and bump that up. Well, Congress has resisted that for some time, and we have resisted making those payments, for some time. So it's not a popular answer. Another answer is, well, this number, the cap on current, on the earnings income that can be addressed with the 15.3% tax is currently $142,800 for 2021. This does increase with the cost of living, with inflation every year, but one solution is to increase it drastically, higher than normal inflation limits would imply. Our current administration is already looking at putting a second bracket here above $400,000 and upwards, and basically putting a surtax on all those earnings above $400,000 that won't change the tax that's collected for the people who come in below $400,000, including the cap, the cap here. But all of the high income folks would get hit with an additional tax. Another possible solution is to raise the full retirement age above age 67. It may make a lot of sense, because we're all living longer now than when this age 67 was cast in stone, and we're spending a significantly longer time in retirement than we used to. So there's some incentive to raise that age, but it's going to get a number of folks upset that they're not going to start collecting benefits until later in life than they had expected. The COLA allowance that folks are given, could be reduced or even eliminated. Congress is already looking at different definitions of a cost of living adjustment and looking at ways to make that bump up each year a little smaller. They could start means testing your benefits or reduce your benefits in other ways. They could bump up the premiums even faster for Part B and Part D for Medicare. They could raise the age for Medicare when it kicks in above age 65. Again, that may make sense. However, the current policies that Congress is looking at today are looking at the other way around. How can we arrange Medicare for all? In other words, reducing this number. So I don't know how that would get funded. And the final item I have on here is reducing the actual Medicare payments and the coverage that you're, the benefits that you're getting from that, and that would not be popular. So you can see overall why Congress is reluctant to get into this quagmire. Note well that everything we've discussed in this workshop is very complicated. And almost everything in it, there are fine print rules that go along with everything that are way beyond the scope of this workshop and way beyond the scope of my ability to deal with it. So if you need to make a major decision in this area, please talk with an expert who really knows what the current rules on all these issues. Finish up here with some light reading for folks that want to get into some of this in more detail. I'll leave you to work through it yourself and decide what additional reading you might want. I've also given you some websites. All the traditional ones, SSA.gov covers all of the Social Security stuff. Medicare.gov covers this. One of the websites I point you to is opensocialsecurity.com. This is a website with a free calculator for all the various Social Security claiming strategies. It's one of the best free ones out there. And it was designed and put together and offered by Mike Piper. And he also runs a blog. So most of what, he's got a whole bunch of useful articles that are available. And he's one of the folks that I try to follow, he gives you very practical answers to most of your questions. So I would encourage you to explore that if you're in the process of trying to decide what you want to do with your claiming strategies. Finally, we end up with the mandatory cartoon. Just what exactly is your generation going to do about my generation's Social Security? I'm not sure who's asking who on here, but the real question in my mind is how is this little guy going to pay for dad's benefits when the time comes? That's what it amounts to. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this workshop, and we'll look forward to having you again next month when we're going to be looking at estate planning and philanthropy. Thank you and goodbye.